Out of the
All
out of
right.
the
Thank you, Maharaj.
bog,
Thank you, Maharaj. I think we are now
ready to zoom off.
ready. Yes, we are live. And dear devotees, we are very much thankful and appreciative for your association today, as always. Today, we are very much privileged. We are honored to have His Holiness Chandra Swami Maharaj with us today. Most of us, if not all of us, are very much aware of Maharaj. He's been so kind, so generous to us. He's been on our platform quite a number of times to share his love and wisdom with us. So again, Maharaj, we can't thank you enough. You had shared with me privately how busy you are, but you still tried and made it here today. So we can't thank you enough. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
So
Well,
we may
I'm ashamed of the kind of busy I am right now. I'm just busy with a technical issue that got out of hand in my life, and now I'm trying to fix it up. I'm trying to get caught up with my accounting, and I'm almost there, but it's really taking a lot longer than I really wanted it to. At any rate, life in the slow lane, as they say. You have to be patient with me because I'm doing things so slowly.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. So
Oh, Ken is here. Hare Krishna, Ken. How are you?
Hello. So we may put the verse on the screen and then you may start speaking. All right.
Yeah, I'll
do you want to share from your end?
Yeah, I can share from my end. I don't need to share. I already have a software that allow me to put what I need to do. So
okay, so you may take it over.
Okay, so here is what we've got. We have this cosmic manifestation. This is the chapter that we are in second canto. And this is actually the first time in Bhagavatam that we start to hear about how creation works. So we're wondering about how creation works. And now we're going to hear about it because Parikshit will ask the question. He's asking Sukadev Goswami, my dear Sukadev Goswami, how does this material universe get created? Because he wants to know how material universe gets created. So therefore, Sukadev Goswami will begin to describe it for him. And let me take it to the Bhagavad Gita right now here. So here is our verse, and I will focus in on the Sanskrit here. This is Canto 2, Chapter 4, Text 12. Shri Shuka Uvacha Nama Parasmai Purusha Bhuyase Sad Udbhavastana Niroda Lilaya Grihita Shakti Tritayaya Dehinam Antar Bhavayanu Palakshavartmane Shri Shuka Uvacha Nama Parasmai Purushaya Bhuyase Sad Udbhavasthana Niroda Lilaya Grihita Shakti Tritayaya Dehinam Antar Bhavayanu Palakshya Vartmane. So this translates as Sri Sukadev Goswami said, let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who, for the creation of the material world, accepts the three modes of nature. He is the complete whole, residing within the body of everyone, and his ways are inconceivable. So I will repeat that. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who, for the creation of the material world, accepts the three modes of nature. He is complete. He is the complete whole, residing within the body of everyone, and his ways are inconceivable." So the short purport, I'll read it here. The material world is a manifestation of the three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And the Supreme Lord, for the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material world, accepts three predominating forms as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shankar, or Shiva. As Vishnu, he enters into every body materially created. As Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, he enters into every universe. And as Kshirodakashayi Vishnu, he enters the body of every living being. Lord Sri Krishna, being the origin of Vishnu Tattvas, is addressed here as Pada Puman, or Purushottama, as described in Bhagavad Gita 15:18. He is a complete whole. The Purusha avatars are therefore his plenary expansions. Bhakti Yoga is the only process by which one can become competent to know him. Because the empiric philosophers and mystic yogis cannot conceive of the personality of Godhead, he is called Anupalaksha Vartmane, the Lord of the inconceivable way, or Bhakti Yoga. Shri Shukavacha Nama Parasmai Purushaya Bhuyasa Sad Ud Bhavasthana Nirodha Leelaya Grihita Shakti Tritayaya Dehinam Antar Bhavayanu Palakshya Vartmane. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who, for the creation of the material world, accepts the three modes of nature. He is a complete whole, residing within the body of everyone, and his ways are inconceivable." All right, so this is our view for today. We're going to begin, at least this part of Bhagavatam, will begin by describing a little bit about how the process of creation transpires. And this is a very important thing. The process of creation is something that we are all locked into. And because we're locked in to the process of creation, we are manipulated by it. But if through knowledge we hear about the process of bhakti yoga, we can cease being manipulated by it. And instead, we can gradually see through the coverings and the superficial nature of this external world to the reality of the spiritual world. So today, again, we are at July 10th, 2023. And this is Srimad Bhagavatam 2, Canto 2, Chapter 4, Text 12. Uh-oh. Okay. Now, Sukadeva Goswami has appeared as Maharaj Pariksit was recognizing the fact that he was going to die in 7 days. So this was known. He had been cursed by the sage's son, and now he's asking important questions from Sukadeva because he knows that very soon he'll be leaving the world. He'll have to give up his body. So he wants to know what's important. And so this is his question. Sukadeva Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who, for the creation of the material world, accepts the three modes of nature. He is a complete whole, residing within the body of everyone, and his ways are inconceivable. So, actually, why do we need to know about creation? Of course, here in this image, we see kind of Brahma off to the left there, in the center is Vishnu, and toward the right is Shiva. These are our three, what are called guna avatars. And as Prabhupada mentioned in the purport in this particular verse, that these three are accepted by the Supreme to facilitate creation with Brahma, maintenance with Vishnu, and destruction with Shiva. So this is how the universe comes to be. And these three are also the masters of the three modes. That's why they're called guna avatars. So Brahma is the master of the mode of goodness, or sattva. Of passion, or rajas. And Vishnu is the master of the mode of sattva, or goodness. And Shiva is the master of the mode of ignorance, or tamas. So a person, a young person, or maybe an older person too, will maybe look out at the stars at night and think, how did those stars get there? What's going on up there? How did I get here? What is this place? And one of the things we notice is that this world we live in has no easy answers. I mean, certainly we grow up and we go to school and we carry our little lunchbox in our backpack, maybe, or whatever it is, with some books in it. And we hear about reading and writing and arithmetic. And, little by little, we're taught that, somehow or other, there was this explosion. It was the Big Bang, and our universe kind of came into being. At least this is what we hear. And this is the generally accepted view of what's going on here in this material world by people in this material world, at least at the present moment. If we back up the time to 100 years ago, we would have heard a different story. And if we back up 200 or 300 years, we would have heard even a different story still. So we see that it's not always the same story. It depends on what the predominating society tries to understand. And actually understanding who we are and why we're here is a very important thing. Prabhupada has mentioned that. And so the creation of the universe is a topic that helps us to understand ourselves and our place in things. Currently, materialism is taught and propagated everywhere. This gives people the wrong idea of the purpose of the world, and indeed their own purpose as well. So why are we here? What is this place? Generally, our modern society, our materialistically dominated society, at least in its academic and intellectual capacity, that society is oriented towards materialism, that we are, matter, we will die and that's all over. And we need to somehow or other enjoy in this world, but to enjoy, we have to do something to benefit society. So we have to work. So there's a whole working thing. School is all about teaching people how to be useful members of the modern materialistic society. And at the same time, we gradually learn how to cultivate what we like to do more and more as a materialistic consumer. So we are producers or workers, and we are consumers. And that's what our modern society teaches us. And if we think that way, we will certainly miss the goal of life. We won't have any idea why we're really here. Very diminished conception of what's really happening in the world. So that's one of the reasons why Parikshit is asking about the nature of the universe. And this is actually his question, which was a few verses ago. We're at 2.4.12. This was 2.4.6, where Maharaj Parikshit said, I beg to know from you how the personality of Godhead, by his personal energies, creates these phenomenal universes as they are, which are inconceivable even to the great demigod. So this was the question that Maharaj Parikshit had asked from Sukadeva Goswami, and now Sukadeva Goswami is beginning to answer it. And there are a number of places in Srimad Bhagavatam where this theme or this process of creation is described. And what we will learn is that the process of creation is very intricate. We won't learn the whole story. It's not possible to learn the whole story because it's too intricate, but we will get a general overview of what's going on. Someone who's scientific will want more details, and there's nothing wrong about wanting more details, but knowledge is like a bottomless ocean. No matter how far down you go, you can always go further down. You can always learn more. So in our finite lifetime, the obvious question is, what's worth learning first? What's more important? We could learn so many things, but if we don't learn the most important thing, we may have learned a lot of things that are interesting or useful, and they may even be true, but they won't help us to understand our place in the world and what we need to accomplish while we're here, nor will those kind of secondary and not essential kinds of knowledge help us to recognize what's really going on here. Because you can certainly understand how the details of material nature work. And there are many people who are biologists or quantum physicists, or people who are cosmologists or astrophysicists, geologists, anthropologists, et cetera, et cetera. And they certainly study so many fields of knowledge. But these people, they may understand their particular section of the pie, the big pie of knowledge, but they may miss the point of why we're here. Are we here just to be producers or workers and then later consumers? Is that really why we're here? Is that the purpose and goal of life? And when we die, it's all over? The Vedas say no. And so this is where Parikshit is beginning his discourse. He's hearing, he's asking the question, and Sukadeva Goswami is beginning his discourse. He's beginning by speaking about the nature of the Supreme and the process of creation. And we hear that central to the process of creation are the three modes of nature. So in Bhagavad Gita 14.5, we have Sattvam Rajastamam Iti Guna Prakriti Sambhava Nirbandhnati Mahabaho Dehi Dehinam Avyayam. Material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So here we have the three modes of nature. You'll see that behind them at the lotus feet is the Supreme Lord. So he's above the three modes of nature. But the modes of nature, almost like a puppeteer pulling puppet strings, is forcing the living entities to behave in various ways. The living entity thinks, I am free, but that's not actually true. Living entity is not free. He is bound by the modes of nature. And as a result of being bound by the modes of nature, he acts in a very conditioned way. So if one does not understand what's going on in the world, one is not undertaking any kind of spiritual process, then one will be like a puppet on a string, pushed around by the modes of nature, and one's purpose of life will certainly not be served, nor will one become happy. As a matter of fact, we will just get old and wretched. And even if life has been good to us, we will find that we no longer enjoy things the same way we once could, and all the doors are shutting, and we die, and we don't know really where we came from or where we will go. Those who suppose that this life is the end will be in for a rude awakening, that it's not actually the end, that life goes on. The body dies, but the soul does not. And we also learn that we have 8 separated material energies. And these are listed in Bhagavad Gita 7:4. Bhumir apo nalo vayu kamana buddhirevacha ahankara iti yame binna prakriti ashtada. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these 8 constitute my separated material energies. Now, our modern scientific world is very expert and very focused on focusing in on the nature of earth or solid matter, water or liquids, fire and or energy, air and ether, the time-space continuum. So the material world is expert, and the scientists are expert at analyzing how those things interact, but they are not interested at all in mind, intelligence, and false ego. They don't know what those things are at all. Those are also material elements, but they are subtle. So they're not so easy to witness as the gross material elements. But our bodies are made of these gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are 5 of them. The Greeks seem to only recognize 4 of them for whatever reason. But these 5 are actually there in Bhagavad Gita and in the Vedic literature, in the Sankhya philosophy. Now, mind, intelligence, and false ego, they must also be there. And these constitute the subtle body, also material, but the subtle body does not die along with the gross body when the gross body is injured, maimed, or otherwise can no longer continue its material existence. So we learn that there are 5 gross elements and 3 subtle elements. And these are constituents of the material energy. Material energy is not alive, but the living entity finds himself dipped into the material energy. And as a result, the living entity tries to enjoy the material energy. So this is the process that we are beginning to investigate in Bhagavatam. And as I was saying, Bhagavatam will describe the material process a number of ways, a number of times. So I want to stop for a moment here and see if anyone has any question.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I was just, I had never thought about it until you just mentioned it, that somehow the Greeks concentrated their astrological knowledge on 4 elements: earth, water, air, fire.
Right.
without the ether, which we understand from the Vedic scriptures that the growths are five. And they tend to omit the fifth one, which is ether. Now, the base in modern astrology, the bedrock of astrology is based on these four elements. So how accurate could our astrology be if we leave out the ether, the Etherean part of the elements? How then could our astrology be accurate? Because there may be some other beings whose element may be Etherean, but they are not included in astrology of today. Of course, as devotees, we know astrology is not very important anyway, but just for knowledge sake, I'm asking this question. All right.
Yeah. So astrology is kind of a deep subject. Unfortunately, Western astrology is skewed. Our spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, had a spiritual master, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was very expert in astrology, and he described that, generally speaking, Western astrology is skewed by a few degrees, and therefore comes to the wrong conclusions oftentimes. And he, after a certain point, gave up the process of astrology, although he was one of the most expert astrologers there was in the math and the figuring of it. So naturally, you could make a case, some people would dispute it, but you could make a case for the fact that the Vedic and the Vedas, the Vedic literature and the Vedas are kind of the basis of all human knowledge. But of course, our modern view of things is kind of part and parceled out, and pieces are missing, and some pieces are screwed on upside down. So the world had one culture at one time, at least is the way the Vedas present it, and Prabhupada also presented it that way. And then with the Battle of Kurukshetra, because so many were killed, the leaders or the people who organized the world around us, they died, most of them. So all these various kingdoms are smaller pockets of human, culture developed, and they were developed in isolation. So wherever you were, if you were separated by a body of water or a great mountain or something like that, then you and your cohorts would develop a different culture. And eventually these became the various different cultures of our world that only retained some fragments. And so the Greek culture retained many things that were there in the Vedic culture, but some things they omitted. For some reason, they didn't have an understanding of this ether element. Why exactly? Maybe they rejected it, or maybe they didn't know about it, or maybe they couldn't understand it, so they didn't talk about it very much. But that could be a type of research. But in general, they also were, for the most part, materialists. So they didn't have a deep concept of God. And in general, most of our beginning cultures in the world had, if at all, they had this concept of the demigods. Now, that was very prominent in the world a millennium ago. And certainly before that, that cultures would worship many gods. The Greeks did it. The Romans did it. The Egyptians did it. People in Africa did it. People in North America did it. Wherever you were, there were people who were worshiping various demigods. In Scandinavia, they did it. So we have this idea of worshiping the person who organizes the sun, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea of a single God that was actually above all these gods became lost. So the Greeks didn't have it. And the Greeks that we credit with our culture, our modern Western culture, those Greeks were particularly noted by the fact that they rejected the demigods. Most Greeks worship demigods, but not the ones that we read about in our philosophy texts. These particular Greeks were very uninterested in demigods. Xenophanes actually wrote various things against worship of the demigods. And in general, if you go to a college course on philosophy, you will find that Western philosophers of modern day are very much interested in the Greeks for one reason, and that reason is that they put aside the demigods and any talk of some supernatural, and they try to base things on total empirical understanding. And for them, that meant earth, water, fire, air. They left out ether. So ether was there because we see that even in the 20th century, there was a concept of luminiferous ether in the scientific world. So even though the Greeks didn't have it, our modern scientists, modern in the sense of 20th century, had some concept of ether. And later they decided it didn't exist. There was a famous experiment done by Einstein and some others where they decided that ether really didn't exist. But in any case, if you leave some part of the picture out, you don't have the whole picture. And if you screw some pieces of the picture on upside down, then you're going to have some problem. But the Vedas actually have the whole picture. And, we can discuss about that, but this is what this whole section of Bhagavatam is leading into, an understanding of how this strange material world actually functions, what's going on here. The gross aspect of it, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. The subtle aspect of it, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And the controllers of it, the demigods. And finally, beyond that, the supreme controller, the supreme Lord, and what's outside of the material world altogether, the spiritual world, which is not either earth, water, fire, air, or mind, intelligence, and false ego. It's none of those things. It's a completely different substance altogether. That's how I would respond. Does that answer your question, or did I go off on a tangent?
No. It does. It does. Except that I as you answered, I have another question in line with the answer you gave, which is still in line with the elements. And I hope I do not offend you by asking this, because I had asked this question to one devotee, Prabhupada's disciple, and he became offended by it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I won't get offended.
But what I wanted to find out, because I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, I know ahankara means ego, but I wanted to find out, is ahankara ego or false ego? The reason I asked, and I'm asking today, is because I think in my own little mind that there must be a difference between ego and false ego, just as there is a difference between pride and false pride. I don't know if that is right. So I don't know, does ahankara in Sanskrit translate as ego or false ego? Maharaj?
Okay, that's an easy one, actually.
Okay.
And I was going to get into that a little bit, and maybe I'll jump one slide ahead. But, you know, ahankara means false ego. And yes, we do have a real ego. That real ego is I am servant of Krishna. That's real ego. That's who we really are. So if there's a false something, there has to be a real something somewhere, right? So it just makes sense. And what we discover, we'll look at this here real quick. Oh, I did the wrong thing. Is we will eventually get into Sankhya Yoga. Now, you all are at second canto, fourth chapter. But in Radha Govinda Mandir, we're at the third canto, the 24th chapter, and Kapila Dev is about to speak, and he will speak Sankhya Yoga or Sankhya philosophy to his mother Devahuti. And everything in this list here is material.
Yeah.
This is all material. Now, you'll see at the very top there, there's something called pradhan. That is the undifferentiated material energy. And it comes from the Brahma Jyoti. So the Brahma Jyoti is directly Krishna's effulgence, and it's spiritual in nature. But for the creation of the material world, this spiritual substance, this Brahma Jyoti, is transformed into something called the pradhan. And the pradhan has no form. It has no changes, no details. It's just plain energy, almost like a white field. It's not exactly the same as the Brahma Jyoti because it's material. So everything starting with the pradhan is material. So all of these things are material. We have a real mind, we have a real ego, we have real senses, we have a real life, we have real desires, but everything from this point on is the fake version of it. It's like if you were a kid getting involved in a computer game. So you have a real name, you have real hands, you have real eyes, you're sitting on a real chair, you are in a real room, you have real relationships with your mother and your siblings or whatever. But at the same time, now you're in a computer game, and that computer game, you have a computer name, right? You pick a name before you begin playing one of these things. You have an avatar, you pick a computer body, you have the computer's arms and legs, the virtual arms and legs in the play, the computer game. And you have relationships with people who could be anywhere in the world, and you don't know what they look like. All you know is that you're interacting with them. And in the very same way, this is what's happening. We have a real ego, we have a real life, we have real desires, but we're putting them all aside because we're focusing on a virtual world. And that's exactly what's happening. So this is how Krishna creates that virtual computer program, that computer game that we are playing right now. So first it starts with the pradhan, which is undifferentiated, inert. And it is the same everywhere. It has no details. Now, pradhan begins to change when the Supreme Lord glances at it. It's called the Mahatat then. So pradhan is now no longer inert. It is starting to bubble and foam around and move. And there starts to be something that comes out of it. And that thing that comes out of it is called ahankara, which is false ego. So that's the first thing that's produced by the Mahatat. So false ego is produced from the Mahatat. Now, the next stage of what happens is the Ahankara produces three more things: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So the Ahankara does not disappear. It creates these things, but Ahankara is still left. And we have three new things: Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. We were just reading in this verse how goodness, passion, and ignorance are the beginning of creation. So from Sattva, we have the mind and the 10 controlling demigods, the ones that control the various working and knowledge acquiring senses. Then from Rajas, we get intelligence and the 5 working senses and the 5 knowledge senses. And then from Tamas, we get earth, water, fire, air, and ether, along with the subtle sense objects, form, sound, touch, taste, and smell. So everything on that page that says Sankhya, everything there is material. None of it is eternal. None of it is our real self. This is the, excuse me, virtual reality. So everything there is virtual. None of it is real or eternal, but it gives us a way of spending our time, and it gives us a way of interacting with others in a virtual domain. Although we are real persons and we have a real name, we have a real purpose, we have real desires, we are completely neglecting that to play the computer game of the material world. So the first thing that has to happen is we have to have ahankara, which is false ego. But as you were asking, we have real ego as well.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Your PowerPoint is really, really on point. And I wish you could share that with me later on, if possible.
Well, I'll upload the images of this PowerPoint.
It's so good. So beautiful.
To
Thank
I
you
guess
for-
our WhatsApp channel there. I can upload it.
Yes, thank you. So I think we have a question from Mother Shri Upanishad. Please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Dhanavad. All glory to you, Prabhu. Hari Bol.
Hare
It's
Krishna.
been a long, long time.
Yeah,
And
I know.
I just wanted to say thank you so very much for that chart. Could you please post that again? That
Okay.
is so very, very helpful. Thank you so very, very much. I miss you. Hare Krishna. Hari Bol.
Yeah, I'm a stick in the mud here in Brooklyn. I don't get out very much, you know.
So you're in Brooklyn, right?
Yeah, right.
I miss you for the Rath Yatra then. I didn't get to see you. Were you there?
Yeah, I was there. I was at the changing bodies and the reincarnation booth. That's
Oh,
where
Okay.
Maharaj, I am so sorry that I didn't get to see you. Please forgive me.
I was
not
doing the same
having
thing
your
that I am now.
association. Horrible. I'll get to
Horrible.
see you real soon. Could you send an
Okay.
email address for you as well, please? Could you put
Okay,
that in the chat?
I'll drop it in the chat there.
Thank you. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shri Upanishad Devi. Hare Krishna. Shumara Prabhu, please you may unmute. Hare Krishna.
Well, Dandavad Pranam Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I'm in the traffic, so I hope the noise is not disturbing. Thank you very much for the wonderful class. My question, borders on the analogies you gave about trying to find out our place in the world. Of course, I think more than trying to find out our place in the world, it's also that we're curious to know about our origin. And there's so much debate about that now. So I found a verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 10. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 10. In this verse, it is mentioned that Vaikuntha, that the influences of the modes are not there. Neither the influence of the illusory energy.
You're saying 2, 8, 10? Is that what?
Yes,
what the,
yes, Maharaj. Canto 2,
Okay, I'm
chapter
looking.
8, text 10.
Okay,
So
I'm
very
looking
nice
at that.
verse. So, and like you rightly mentioned about the first ego, which is the first element in the material world, that is what is giving us the misidentification. So in Vaikuntha, in the spiritual world, there's no misidentification because the real ego exists, not false ego. And the illusory energy cannot also enter that region, according to this verse.
Right.
So with all these points, can we just conclude that the soul, Jiva, does not come from Vaikuntha? And
Yeah.
so that is what I want to know.
Right. That's at least the way I conclude it, and that's what Prabhupada has taught us in general. There are people who have a different opinion, even people in ISKCON who have a different opinion, but I have never heard anybody give a explanation of how that works. The living entity made a mistake. That's what we always find out, that the living entity made a mistake. So how could you make a mistake if you were in the Brahma Jyoti? As Prabhupada said, if you're in the Brahma Jyoti, you're already fallen. You're not in the spiritual world. So you can't make a mistake from already having been in a mistake. So the process means that we came from the spiritual world. We were in the spiritual world, but because of our material wanting, because we wanted to enjoy like Krishna or be the center, so Krishna allowed us the facility of coming to this material world. So that's the whole idea. And that's why if you look at Prabhupada's books, some people say that we came from the Brahma Jyoti, and that is true to a certain extent. I use the analogy sometimes that if you're standing outside of a subway terminal and you're watching people come out from the subway, someone could ask you the question, where are these people coming from? And you could say, well, they're coming from the subway. It's a true answer, but it's not their ultimate origin. They lived somewhere and they got on the subway, and then later on they got off the subway. And so what we actually know then is that the living entity is in the Brahma Jyoti, but there's a number of reasons why the living entity is in the Brahma Jyoti. The living entity winds up there because either the living entity makes an effort to become, through study of Gyan Yoga, he wants to join the Brahma Jyoti, so he's allowed to do that because of his effort. Also, when living entities are still loitering in the material world, when the end of the material world comes about, then they enter into the body of Mahavishnu. And then when the body of when the material world is again generated, then they come back out of the body of Mahavishnu by the agency of the Brahma Jyoti. So there's a number of reasons why living entities can be in the Brahma Jyoti, but it is not their ultimate origin. It would suggest that we had no face, form, or anything, and we somehow came into the material world. So if you look at Prabhupada's purports, you will see everywhere, littered through every page practically of Prabhupada's purports, the returning back to the spiritual world. The word return is there. You can't go back to some place that you have never been. You can go to some place that you have never been, but you can't go back to some place that you've never been. You can't leave your original position unless it was your original position. So we are going to our original home. Prabhupada uses those words. He named his magazine Back to Godhead. He didn't name it Up to Godhead. He named it Back to Godhead. So we did make a mistake. That's why we're here in the material world. So we came here because we turned our face away from Krishna. We turned our face away. And so as a result, we wound up here in the material world. And we can get out of the material world by turning our face back towards Krishna and becoming again a servant of Krishna. So this is the nature of the process of spiritual life. I know this is a controversial topic, and generally most of the members of the Gaudiya Math, they use this constantly as a picking point to try to confuse people from ISKCON, because they think that we have a lower understanding of it or something like that. But Prabhupada was very clear about the item. Otherwise, you would not see everywhere in Prabhupada's books going back to our original position, back, original. He would not be using those terms. He would not say, go back home, back to Godhead. He would not be saying, return to our spiritual world. He would not use the word return. But you see that all the way through our books. It was clear what Prabhupada actually intended. Now, that someone could have at some point or another wound up in the Brahmajyoti, no problem. And that some living entities are coming into the Brahmajyoti, from the Brahmajyoti when they come into this incarnation of the material world, no problem. But that's not their original position. So I just wanted to kind of make that point clear, because that's the way I understand it. Someone's willing to explain in a very concise way how the living entity could have originally started in the Brahmajyoti. That's an entirely different philosophical view, and it creates philosophical problems. So I would like someone to, if they're going to sell me on that idea, to help me understand what those philosophical problems, how to work them out. But, you know, I've never had anybody do it. All people say is that's what they say, what it's said in the Jaiva Dharma. Okay, maybe it says that somewhere in the Jaiva Dharma, but that's the way I view it anyway.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj. Shema, there was a nice comment from your background, so you got muted.
Please, can I have a follow-up question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
And I love the way Maharaj answers this question. So it gives me hope that it can at least satisfy my inquiry. So Maharaj, there are two questions which are very hard to answer when it comes to saying that we are originally, well, of course, I believe that originally we all belong to Krishna. There's no doubt about that. But that the living entity comes from Vaikuntha, first from Vaikuntha, it's very difficult to understand considering the description of Vaikuntha. And that verse I quoted is just one of those descriptions that shows that the living entity could never have made a mistake in such a perfect condition where illusory energy does not exist and there's no tendency of rebelling there, because even the verse says that everyone there obeys Krishna.
Right.
That verse says everyone there obeys Krishna. So that is one question. And then the second question, I mean, the first question, make it clear, is that Vaikuntha, if it is the origin, then it is doubtful how the living entity can make mistake from there, because the description shows that there's no possibility of making mistake. They're all perfect beings. And the conditions are perfect without the influence of illusory energy. Now, the other question is, so if we have come from there and we have made mistake, what is the guarantee that when you go back this time around, you will not make mistake any longer? Because that perfect condition didn't help you in the first place. So what is the guarantee that if you go back again, you will not make any mistake. So it's not a roller coaster kind of a place that where you go and come, or it is a place that is eternally perfect. And if we find our way back, now we will be able to, get back to the perfect condition where we will no longer make mistakes. So anyway, those are some of the questions that I had to beat. So if you can throw light on this, Maharaj, I'll be happy. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Those are good questions. I think those questions are, in general, help us to understand things in a very deep way. The first point that you're making is that, what was it again? That, what's that? That
No, I think he was talking to somebody else.
Oh, okay. That, what was the first question again? I remember.
He was saying that the description of a Vaikuntha.
Right. We come from Vaikuntha, right?
Yeah.
So Vaikuntha is the entire realm of the spiritual world. Vaikuntha is the entire realm of the spiritual world, which includes Goloka Vrindavan and all the other more detailed places. And yes, as you say, there is no entry of the material energy in Vaikuntha. That's true. However, it's described as one has something called causeless, what is it? How do they put it? Causeless reluctance or causeless desire to be the same as Krishna. So there is that causeless, it's not caused by the material world because the material world is not there in Vaikuntha. Causeless unwillingness to serve, that's the term I'm looking for. Now finally it pops into my mind. So causeless unwillingness to serve. And that's there. And as you say, Prabhupada one time did say, although in Bhagavad Gita it says that once one goes there, he cannot return, Prabhupada said it is possible to return to the material world. So why does somebody come here to begin with? They come here because causeless unwillingness to serve, it's not Krishna causing him to not want to serve. It's not that they see others around them not wanting to serve and that inspires them not to serve. None of those two things are true. Yet at the same time, there's something called causeless unwillingness to serve. And as a result, we have free will. Otherwise, free will doesn't have any meaning. If one doesn't have free will, then we're all robots. Then we just have one possibility, and that's to serve Krishna. Krishna's surrounded by loving robots, but that's not the way it is. We are told very emphatically that we have free will. So that means we have free will not just in the material world, we have it in the spiritual world as well. So for free will to exist, that means there has to be at least two alternatives. And of course, in the spiritual world, everybody is following the main alternative, which is service to Krishna. So you're following the main alternative, which is service to Krishna. But because causeless unwillingness to serve is there, we can turn our face away from Krishna momentarily. And when we do, then we fall here. Now, if we return back to the spiritual world, there's the memory of having once been here and understanding of what is in store for you if you go there again, So there's that tendency not to make the same mistake. As they say, the burnt child shuns the fire, So you burnt once, you're not likely to be burnt again. Although it's still possible. Prabhupada even said that one can make the same mistake again, although it's very unlikely, because now you know what's up for you when you come to the material world. If you've never been here, then you may be a little bit unaware of what's going to happen here. So that's there. And there is no absolute guarantee because nothing crushes free will. Otherwise, then we become robots.
Yeah.
So either we're robots or we're not. If we're not robots, that means that at any time, in any place, in the spiritual world or here, we can make the wrong choices. So in the spiritual world, there's no impetus to make the wrong choice. However, for free will to exist, there has to be this possibility for causeless unwillingness to serve. So Krishna Bahir Mukahanya Bhogavanchakare Nikatastamayatare Chapatiyadare. That's, I think, from the Prema Vivarto. There's two verses. I get confused which one they come from. So Krishna Bahir Mukahanya Bhogavanchakare Nikatastamayatare Chapatiyadare. That's, of course, I think it's Bengali, but maybe it's Sanskrit. And it means that the living entity turns his face away from Krishna and Maya slaps him down. So this is often described as how the living entity came from the spiritual world, by turning his face away from Krishna. So it's not full on Maya, there's no Maya there, but there is some methodology. Maybe it's a little inconceivable to us. But otherwise, we have to start explaining the other problems that come when a person assumes that we were never in the spiritual world and we are going back to the spiritual world. Then we have to explain why the Supreme Lord would start most of the living, or at least 1/4 of the living entities, why the Supreme Lord would start them in the material world to begin with. Then we didn't make a mistake by following in the material world. We were here to begin with. And at what point does the living entity come out of Brahma Jyoti? Because we know that the living entity is eternal, not just in the past, not just in the future, but also in the past. So that means we were eternally in the Brahma Jyoti. That makes no sense to me, no how, that we were eternally in the Brahma Jyoti. And then what would have prompted us to come out of the material world and then learn about Krishna and go to the spiritual world for the first time? None of that makes any sense to me. It has nothing to do with any philosophy I've ever read in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam and the Upanishads or anywhere else, But if someone can explain to me how that works, then I'll maybe open my mind to the possibility that we could have come from the Brahma Jyoti. But that doesn't appear to be what Prabhupada is telling us. And he says that we were with Krishna, we were in a rasa with Krishna. He was asked the question directly, and he responded to the question directly. And the alternatives were that we were in the Brahma Jyoti, or, obviously we weren't created. The entire rest of the religions of the world assume that there was a point where the soul was created, which the Vedas directly reject. That we are, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that we are, never was there a time when you did not exist, nor me, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So Krishna is describing right there that the Arjuna, not only he and Arjuna, but everyone was eternally existing somewhere. So the question is, where? So are we really to believe that we were eternally existing in the Brahma Jyoti? And then what was that event and why did it happen at a particular point that popped us out of the Brahma Jyoti into the gross material world so that now we can go back, So at any rate, I've said a few things about it, and it makes sense to me that we were in the spiritual world. Now, maybe it's difficult to explain exactly how causeless unwillingness to serve somehow exists in the spiritual world, but it must in some kind of way. Otherwise, we would have to say that there's no free will in the spiritual world. And that means everybody in the spiritual world is a robot, which makes no sense either. So in this way, that's how I would respond to some of these questions. And as you were saying, what's the guarantee that we won't fall again? There actually is no guarantee like that.
Thank you
It's
so
not
much.
likely, but it's not a guarantee.
Please, Maharaj, permit me to ask two more questions.
Shrimara Prabhu, please hold on for a second, please. Just a second. Thank you. Thank you so much, Maharaj. We just want to recognize the divine presence of His Holiness Chandra Swami Maharaj.
Oh, yeah, I saw it.
So, Maharaj, Hare Krishna, please accept.
Hare Chandra Swami.
Hare
Where are
Krishna.
you in the physical universe? I know you're on this Zoom.
Hare Krishna.
Jai, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Mother.
Jai Prabhu. I have another question too. I just want to add to what Maharaj has already said, you know,
Okay.
and when someone else gets to ask another question, please let me just confirm a couple things that I wanted
All right.
to acknowledge. All right.
Okay.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
All right, Maharaj, thank you very much. One thing I enjoy about your answering is just very being frank and also accepting the possibility of the inconceivableness of answering this question correctly. Now, 2 points, two more questions I'm going to ask, and I'll keep quiet. One is maybe 3 questions, so maybe 3 points. One is that Krishna himself said in Bhagavad Gita that there are 2 types of living entities, fallible and infallible. And he mentioned there in that verse 15:16 that the fallible ones are always in this material world, and the infallible ones are always in the spiritual world. That is 15:16, coming from Krishna direct.
Mhm.
Krishna also says that when one comes to his kingdom, he doesn't come back here. Krishna gives that guarantee that he doesn't come back. Many places in the Gita, Krishna told Arjuna like that. So now to hear that there is no guarantee, that sounds to be a bit against the scripture. Krishna gave the guarantee in many verses, which I'm driving now, but if I'm settled, I can just quote those verses. I think 15:7 and some other verses in the Gita. Krishna gives the guarantee that you will not come back. So those are the 2 points. Krishna himself gave a reason for living entities being fallible. He said the fallible ones are always in the material world, and
we cannot hear you anymore, Shrimara Acharya. We cannot hear you. Your mic is on, but we cannot hear you.
I think he probably popped his,
Maybe his
plug out of the unit of
Yeah.
his phone or something like that. He thinks he's speaking, but we can't hear him.
yeah.
Well,
I'm
okay.
okay. I finished with
Okay.
my question. I don't know whether I finished it. You had me through.
Yeah, I think Maharaj had it. Maharaj, if I may say this before you attempt to answer his question, because when you were answering Prabhuji's question, you had made reference to a quotation. He said it's from it says from 2 different sources, and I looked it up, and there is this statement said in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, and I'm going to share. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 20.
Yeah, that's the other one, Krishna Bhuli Se Jiva. It's very much
Yes.
like a Krishna Bahir Mukha Hanyak Bhogavanchakare.
Exactly.
The two verses are really similar.
Okay, so the translation is, forgetting Krishna, the loving entity has been attracted by the external feature from time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy, Maya, gives him all kinds of misery in his material existence. And in the opening purport, Srila Prabhupada says, when the loving entity forgets his constitutional position as an eternal servant of Krishna, he is immediately entrapped by the illusory external energy. The living entity, this is where it's very interesting. The living entity is originally part and parcel of Krishna and is therefore the superior energy of Krishna. He is endowed with inconceivable, minute energy that works inconceivably within the body. However, the living entity, forgetting its position, is situated in material energy. So here, Srila Prabhupada is saying, actually, before I say this, yes, Krishna has said that those who go to his abode never comes back. But we should also remember that Krishna oftentimes breaks his own promises. And that is why when there is something very, very urgent and important that he knows is not going to break, he asks his devotee to make such pronouncement. And even though Sri Krishna has said that, but Srila Prabhupada has also said that, like Maharaj was saying, being in the spiritual world does not mean that one is now robot, that he cannot do what he wants to do. So even in the spiritual world, we still have our free will. And if we decide to take on a holiday trip to this material world and we find ourselves here, that's our own problem. But Maharaj, you may continue to speak if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, again, the idea is there that some people say, there was this whole book called Even the Leaves Never Fall from Vaikuntha, but it was rejected by most of the devotees that were, part of the Shastra review teams, so why did they reject it? Because they rejected it because we find out that the living entity is eternal. He's eternal both in the future and in the past. And if he's eternal in the future and the past, that means that he must have been somewhere. So where was he in the past? Was he in the Brahmajyoti? Is that where he started? And that's what the alternative view is, that he was in the Brahmajyoti. Is there sin in the Brahmajyoti? I think no. The modes of material nature are in more or less equilibrium in the Brahmajyoti. So in one sense, the Brahmajyoti is many times described as the boundary line between the spiritual and material world. So the spiritual world is the place where there's actually activity, but in the Brahmajyoti, there is no activity, only a merging for a time with the white light. So, you can only talk about this so much, and people who have really been, discussing this with people from the, for the most part, the Gaudiya Math, they again and again say that this could not be, this is, whatever it is. So, as they say, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So it only makes sense to talk about this so much. Yeah. But the point that I'm trying to gather, and the point that I'm trying to get across is, if you consider Prabhupada an Acharya, then his view on it seems to make the most importance to you. Now, if you're actually focused in the Gaudiya Math, then I can understand how you would have some issue with Prabhupada. Maybe he isn't telling us the highest thing. Maybe he really doesn't know. You're free to do that, But those who were initiated by him are not free to do that. And in fact, even if I wasn't free to do that, if I was free to do that, it doesn't make sense to me from a philosophical point of view, because you run into so many philosophical problems when you try to explain how the living entity could start off in a nascent or a non-physical, non-active position in the Brahma Jyoti, how that could be an eternal position. And as you know, Sahadev was just reading there, you know, that the living entity was forgetting his constitutional position. What does it mean, constitutional position? Just try to understand even what that word means. Constitutional position is sometimes said to be original position. Constitutional, original. Constitutional means not spurious, not external, not temporary, but constitutional position means original, foundational, irrefutable position. What is it? A servant of Krishna. That's our constitutional position. So we turn our face away from it. Both of those verses describe it that way, that when we somehow turn our face away from Krishna, it's possible then to come down into the material world. When we come to the material world, how do we get there? We go through the Brahma Jyoti. You know, we leave Krishna's kingdom on a ray of light from Krishna's body, and we enter into the material world. That's how the living entities are impregnated into the material world, through the glance of Krishna. That's what we learn as how Krishna, as we're going to learn in several sections of Bhagavatam, that Krishna glances at the material world and impregnates it with the living entities and their destiny, and therefore they come there. So that's one way of getting into the Brahma Jyoti, but it's not the original position. And yes, Prabhupada did say that. If he said that, then it means something. If you feel that, you know, it contradicts scripture, then be my guest, you know. Then you have to deal with the other problems that happen of explaining how the living entity was in the Brahma Jyoti forever. You have to explain why we didn't make a mistake. So we got no reason to feel bad about ourselves being in here. We were, by our constitutional nature, now you're saying our constitutional position, our constitutional nature is the Brahma Jyoti, which is a very different thing from serving Krishna. Nobody serves Krishna in the Brahma Jyoti. Nobody thinks nothing in the Brahma Jyoti. You're just oming out there, you know. So that's, you know, that's all I can say about it. And, you know, otherwise we just get into the point where, yes, it is, no, it's not. Yes, it is, no, it's not. Your mother wears army shoes and all that kind of stuff. So there's no point in arguing the point beyond that stage. Dhruta Karma wrote a very nice presentation of how Prabhupada was presented with this particular question and how Prabhupada answered it. If you're a disciple of Prabhupada, that should mean something. And even beyond that, the other view doesn't mean anything to me. I can't understand it. If somebody can explain it to me in a way that isn't just, you know, insisting that it's true, you know, there's no explanation behind it, then I'll be willing to listen.
Well, thank you so much, Maharaj. I'm fortunate to say that I have copies of almost all the articles from Dhruta Karma Prabhu on this topic. And this is a topic most of us, at least, understand that fortunately, unfortunately, it will keep lingering on till time indefinite. But like Maharaj, you're saying, if we truly follow and honor Srila Prabhupada as our Acharya, then we'll go by what he says. I'm not Shastric. I don't know the Shastra, and my memory is very poor. But I remember this verse because we just discussed it in our Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita discourse. And it's in, if I may share this, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila chapter 5, text number 22. And I will encourage the devotees to try and read this particular verse, because Srila Prabhupada poured out so much of his love into this purport. It's the same verse from Brahma Samhita, but Srila Prabhupada did not give such elaborate purport in the Brahma Samhita as he did here in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chintamani prakara sat ashokalpa vriksha laksha vriteshi sharabila vipalayantam lakshmi sahasra satasam brahma sevyamanam govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. So in that lengthy purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned something here, and I've highlighted it. As spiritual sparks of the beams emanating from the transcendental body of the Lord, we are all permanently related with him and equal to him in quality. The material energy is a covering of the spiritual spark. But in the absence of that material covering, the living beings in Vaikuntha Loka are never forgetful of their identities. They are eternally cognizant of their relationship with God in their constitutional position of rendering transcendental love and service to the Lord. Because they constantly engage in the transcendental service of the Lord, it is natural to conclude that their senses are also transcendental. For one cannot serve the Lord with material senses. The inhabitants of Vaikuntha Loka do not possess material senses with which to lord it over material nature. So Srila Prabhupada is stating here that we are all spiritual sparks of the beings emanating from the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna. That means that wherever Krishna was is where we originally belong to. Now, because we are marginal potency of the Lord, we can choose either to be in the spiritual world or to be in the material world. But sometimes, especially like this Gaudiya math, they speak as if the marginal energy is a geographical location where the living entities are located. But it is just a choice that the living entity can choose whether they want to be in the material world or they want to be in the spiritual world. So just as we are in the material world and we are wanting to go back to the spiritual world, so similarly, those in the spiritual world may also want to come to this material world. The reason, I do not know, but the possibility that somebody in the spiritual world wanting to come to the material world is there. Otherwise, if, like Maharaj was saying, if this is our constitutional position, then why are we trying to run away from it? This is what we are made to be. So let's stay here. But we don't want to be here. We want to go to the spiritual world. And actually, Srila Prabhupada says we want to go back to the spiritual world. Maybe we may rest this particular topic for today and move on to another topic. And there is a, Maharaj, if you still have time, I know you spent some 90 minutes with us. There is one interesting question in the chat room, if you may take it. This is, it says, Maharaj, it says in the Sri Upanishad that we must learn the process of nations alongside spiritual knowledge. Can you elaborate on this? This is his question from Kenneth.
Well, it says in it that we must learn the process of nations alongside spiritual knowledge. Can you? Yeah. How I would respond to that is that in the Ishopanishad, it explains those two things. By learning nescience doesn't mean that we become admired in nescience or we go purposefully into nescience. So we experience it like taking a look at a big, muddy field and thinking, well, I have to experience slopping around in the mud for a while before I can understand something about it. Rather, what it means is like night and day, like left and right, like north and south, like up and down. there are many dualities in the world where one option is in one kind of has one kind of property, and the opposite option has a different kind of property, and often they're inverse properties of one another. So to understand nescience means to understand how it works. And actually, that's exactly what we're doing right now with reading about the nature of the material world, how it unfolds. We're understanding how it works. So how do we, what are we studying? We're studying material energy, but the material energy is just there to bewilder us and to confuse us. So we're not studying it by throwing ourselves into it and becoming confused. We're studying it by understanding how to keep ourselves aloof from it and know how it works, so we don't become ensnared by it. That's what we're trying to do. And that's actually, I'm glad you brought that point up, because that's one of the main reasons why we're even hearing about the material energy. Sometimes people say, you know, what's the point in studying the material world? We just want to get out of it. But if you don't know your enemy, if you don't know how the trap is going to find itself around your feet, then you're likely to become ensnared by it. So that's exactly what we have to do when we're studying knowledge. We learn what the truth is, and we learn what illusion is and how it works. We don't learn illusion because we want to be able to be very gifted at exploiting illusion and jumping into it. We want to understand what illusion is so we don't become captured by it. That's how I would respond. Does that help at all?
It helps. I don't know about the questioner himself, but I think it's okay. Thank you very much, Maharaj. Kavikanapu, please.
Ken, do you have your volume on at all? Or are you in Gita Nagari or somewhere else these days?
No. It's not. Your voice is a bit distant, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may go ahead and speak.
We heard him a little bit for a few moments, but then he disappeared vocally.
The internet is very spotty here.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, yes. Yeah, thank you, Maharaj, for your answer. I'm at Gita Nagari, preparing lunch for the devotees right now. So I'm kind of doing this one time. So, but I'm listening. So thank you.
Okay.
Good to see you.
Oh, that's the kitchen in Gita Nagari. That's what I'm looking at there.
Hare Krishna.
Hare. All glories.
Kavikanapu, probably please, you may unmute and go ahead.
Yes. I just want to thank Maharaj for his time and for trying to answer the question, the controversial question that the devotees sometimes they bring up, because I just thinking there's no point asking again and again when we know that we cannot accept the reality. Because unless we become humble, we cannot understand that point. And that is why Prabhupada said we don't care about it. And Chaitanya Prabhu says somehow or the other get out of here. Because unless you become humble, you cannot understand that point. Somehow or the other, we are falling down here. And also, like you said, Prabhu quoted Bhagavad Gita, we are internally fallible. We are internally fallible. So we have to be humble. We are marginal entities. Some are internal energy, internal entities. They're internally with Krishna, some are marginal. So they come here, they go there. So we have to be humble to accept our position and focus on get out of fear. That is what I just want to contribute. Thank you very much, Maharaj, for your time. We really appreciate. Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. I don't mind talking about these kind of controversial topics. However, you know, there usually comes a point in a controversial topic where you kind of reach the end of everybody saying what they're going to say and everybody saying back what they're going to say, and you kind of need to move on because there's nothing more really that of any any more importance, and you're just reiterating again and again the same concept.
Well, Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj. But thank you for your comment, Kavikana Prabhu. But
Yeah, I thank you also.
yeah, one thing I just
and
want,
thank you for your comments, Sahadev. They were very
Hare
nice.
Krishna, thank you, Maharaj. But one thing I wanted to remind Kavikana Prabhu of is that somebody asking question, if even the question is controversial, but the question is asked with respect, should not be deemed as disrespectful, and the person or the questioner is not humble. Being humble does not mean you do not ask questions that seem or appear controversial. That's just one thing I just wanted to say. So, but thank you for your comment. We go to Mother Shri Upanishad, please. Unmute.
Jai Hare Krishna. I just want everyone to laugh. It's about time. No, I'm just kidding. I just thought we needed that. Haribol, Hare Krishna, you wonderful, wonderful devotees. You know, everyone is just so beautiful. I've been reading in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I am just so very humbled by it. You know, I just don't even think I deserve to read something so intelligent. But in the first canto, chapter 14, and I just thought I would just share this particular verse. I don't want to read the whole verse, but I just wanted to just share it. And this made me have a lot of faith. This just answered all my questions for me. And it shared with me where I'm at in this path of devotion. And Prabhupada says, this is really amazing. This was so much clarity for me. He says,
Mother, you said 1:14 what?
1:14:34. I wanted to read 33, but I'll just go to 1:14:34 if everyone could do that.
All right.
And it says that in the translation, I'm not going to read the Sanskrit, but maybe I can. Bhagavan api govindo brahmayo bhakta vasalya laha kachit pure sandarmayam sukham aste shurit vitaha. It says in a translation, is Lord Krishna, this is Lord Yudhisthira. Lord Yudhisthira is questioning what's going on now. Things are changing in the world. Arjuna had left and went to Vrindavan, and he hasn't returned yet. And there are a lot of things going on in the world, you know, that's really inauspicious. So they're thinking that we're getting ready to enter the age of Kali Yuga. It's approaching. And so in this particular verse, Yudhisthira is saying, is Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who gives pleasure to the cows, the senses, and the brahmanas, who is very affectionate towards his devotees, enjoying the pious assembly at Dwarka Puri, surrounded by friends. And Prabhupada answers it in this particular voice. He says, he just summed it up for me. He says, here in this particular verse, the Lord is described as Bhagavan, Govinda, Brahmanya, and Bhakta Vasala. He is Bhagavan Swayam, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, full of all opulences, all power, all knowledge, all beauty, all fame, and all renunciation. No one is equal to or greater than him. He is Govinda because he is the pleasure of the cows and the senses. Those, key point right here, those who have purified their senses by the devotional service of the Lord can render unto him real service and thereby derive transcendental pleasures out of such purified senses. Only the impure, conditioned living being cannot derive any pleasure from the senses, but being illusioned by false pleasures of the senses, he becomes servant of the senses. Therefore, We need his protection for our own interests. The Lord is the protector of the cows and Brahminical culture. A society devoid of cow protection and Brahminical culture is not under the direct protection of the Lord, just as the prisoners in the jails are not under the protection of the king, but under the protection of a severe agent of the king, a severe agent of the king. Without protection, cow protection, and cultivation of Brahminical culture qualities in human society, at least for a section of the members of society, no human civilization can prosper at any length. But I wanted to read that because it says that the development of the dormant qualities of goodness, namely truthfulness, equanimity, sense control, forbearance, simplicity, general knowledge, transcendental knowledge, and firm faith in the Vedic wisdom, one can become a Brahmin and thus see the Lord as he is. And I was just reading that to say that until I can become a Brahmin, a devotee, and of the Lord, then I will be able to purify my senses and get a better understanding of why we are where we are and what we're doing while we're doing it. But in the meanwhile, the Lord, he's saying that he is, with his loving affection in the form of a proprietor, master, friend, son, lover, can be transcendentally achieved. A devotee can be any of these. We can achieve this goal. And the stage of a devotee, it attracts that transcendental affection of the Lord. So unless we can develop the qualities of a Brahma, as the Lord has mentioned in the above statements here, as Prabhupada says, then we are not going to ever understand our purpose or whatever we're doing. The whole point is that we have to become Brahmins. We have to become devotional servants of God. And then when we become devotional servants of God, we won't have to ask these questions. We already know why. We'll have that understanding. But in the meanwhile, we should be trying to develop our senses, and to stop being a servant of the senses. And that to me kind of goes in line with what Maharaj was saying. It's just important for us to become pious and devotional. That's all we really have to do, is become a devotee. And that'll answer all the questions about the energy of why we're here and why we're not here. And in the verse prior to that, he gives another explanation. I just don't know why I didn't read it first, but that kind of helped me a lot too. He says, the Lord, along with his liberated souls, comes to the material world to fulfill the mission. They descend to fulfill the mission of the Lord. And they are already liberated souls. We have to become liberated. We're trying to become liberated. Is that the point? Are we all trying to become liberated souls? And that comes through devotional service. And until we can get to that state, we're forgetful. These souls that are liberated, they remember, all of his associates, they remember God. But when they come into contact with that marginal energy, the Tatasta Sakti, they become forgetful too, but that's because of God. He makes them forget. He does that, but they're liberated. But he can do that. He can do whatever he wants.
Thank you so much for sharing that with the Shri Upanishad. And with that, we go to Harichakra Prabhu. And I believe this will be the last question we will take so that we can let Maharaj leave. He's been with us for almost 2 hours. Yeah, Maharaj, we thank you so much for your love and your patience. Harichakra Prabhu, please, you may unmute and we try to.
I'll try to be brief because I have somebody here with me, a customer here with me. But let me. I'm just trying to appreciate whatever Maharaj has been saying and how we are supposed to, like, at least as long as we consider Prabhupada to be an acharya, then whatever he says is what we go with. And so my little thing that I was saying is that sometimes we say that it's like that question of there are two kinds of beings, the fallible and the infallible, and that the fallible resides in the material world and the infallible resides in the spiritual world. So the thing is the material world eternal? Was it not created at a certain point in time? So considering the actual situation of eternity, the material world isn't. And even though we know Lord Vishnu is the Supreme Lord, but if you read how the scriptures also describe how the expansions of Krishna began, from Krishna himself expanded to Balaram, Balaram expanded to the Chaturvya, the four Shankishan forms, what do we call it?
And the Chaturvya expanded it to another second Chaturvya.
Exactly. So with all these things, it shows that if even we don't know anything, we know that originally it was Krishna himself who existed in the spiritual world before all these expansions occurred. Even though we don't know when these expansions started, and these expansions are considered to also be eternal, right? But we don't know when they started. So when we talk about eternity, even though we are saying all these are eternal, but in the actual sense of eternity, there was a point in time when they got manifested. No, hold on. When they got manifested. So I just appreciate what Maharaj was saying, that unless someone is able to prove that we eternally existed, there was a point in time where the living entities we were not like eternal, that we had a beginning somewhere. But as long as we don't have any proof of that, then we go with what Prabhupada is telling us, that we are originally with Krishna and we go back home, back to Godhead. So it means that is our home and we are going back. And well, Maharaj, thank you very much for reinforcing my what do we call it? My conviction. My conviction that we were originally in the spiritual world and we are supposed to learn how to go back home, back to God. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Kavichara Maharaj, are you able to
What do you want?
unmute your mic and say a word before Maharaj leaves, before His Holiness Chandrasekhara Maharaj leaves?
You want $10?
Sorry. Maharaj, you are muted, please. Hare Krishna.
Haribol, very nice, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Of course,
Hare, where are you, Kavichandra Maharaj?
I'm in Accra,
Ghana.
Ghana.
Oh, you're in
Accra.
Ghana.
Yeah.
You're
I'm
in
there
Nigeria.
too, but only virtually.
Yeah. I'm virtually here also. I don't know where I am really. The more we read Prabhupada's whatever, purports, lectures, anything, there's so many ways that he says it, like back to home, back to Godhead. But then there's so many other ways, our original constitutional position, this, that, like to deny that is really disrespectful to Prabhupada. To say that he just said it, as a preaching tactic. But and Krishna says so many times also, this is my promise, you'll come back to me and all these things. So people don't want to admit that they fell down, that they left something good. So they want to blame Krishna that he put us here. But that's not Krishna. Okay, thank you anyway. It's very good, very thorough.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
How's it going in New York? Ram Roy looks really happy these days if I see the video.
Oh yeah, we had a really wonderful Rath Yatra here, more people than ever. It was just in Washington Square, it was just, you couldn't even push your way through the crowd in some places. It was so dense, you know. So
Mercy.
somehow or other, there was a lot going on. Krishna is bestowing his mercy.
Yeah.
Everybody's visiting right now. We have all of our devotees out there in Ohio or somewhere doing a whole little tour.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right now. Many of
After
them
the-
went.
After
Yeah.
the Vrindavan thing.
Yeah, they went to New Vrindavan, and they went to Columbus and Akron and Cleveland and a few other places.
Yeah, mercy.
Oh,
Spreading the New York Sankirtan around.
yeah.
Okay, well, I hope to get back to New York someday, but I'm stuck here. These Indians said they could get me a nice visa, and they took my passport. And they just promised today, but it's already 5 o'clock. Hasn't happened yet. So. It's been a week. Every day. Yeah, don't worry. It's just now coming. Don't worry. And I can't go anywhere because it's going to come. All right. Thank you very much for helping
Hare
us.
Krishna.
Maybe Maharaj is a strategy just to keep you there a little longer. But they don't get to have the association that often, so I guess it's a strategy. This Indians.
All right. Well, you can book me for class more often if you want.
Oh, Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Yes.
Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj,
Hare Krishna.
so Maharaj, you're speaking tomorrow. Yes.
Oh,
Yes, because tomorrow,
Me?
yes.
Really, I haven't gotten notice yet. Okay.
Oh, I'll send it to you after the class. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, right. So much advance notice.
Hare
I
Krishna.
hope well, it looks like I won't be traveling tomorrow.
Okay.
No.
That'll be nice.
Okay. Haribol.
Hare Krishna. So, dear devotees, we thank you all for your patience, your love, and dedication to Srimad Bhagavatam Katha. And at this point, we're going to humbly request you all to kindly unmute, and we all chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our appreciation to our revered speaker, His Holiness Chandra Swami Maharaj, for his love and time and patience and wisdom shared with us today. Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Mancha Kalpataribhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo.
Hare Krishna.
All praise to His Holiness Chandra Swami Maharaj ki jai. All praise assembled Vaishnava devotees. Hare.
All glorious to the assembled Vaishnava. Vanchakopani Kripa Sindhu Vaishnava. Hare Krishna.